Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Brandt. I'm a product designer for the Plan Group, specifically product planning. And today I was just going to review some tips and tricks when it comes to MR reviews and some things that I've started to do that's helped me out with reviews, created some efficiencies, as well as just made sure I'm kind of capturing different things that potentially I was maybe missing in the past. I'll give one caveat. A lot of the tools that I'm going to be showcasing are kind of extensions based off of Chrome. So if you're an Arc user, I apologize. I don't have any Arc add-ons really included here, but I'm sure there's some similar stuff that you can use as well. All right, so one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was responsive testing. And I know most of you are probably familiar with just kind of resizing the browser to test different viewport sizes and seeing how things reflow. But one of the things that's kind of helped me have a better visualization of how our actual breakpoints affect the reflow is by using what is called the, let's see, bring it up here, the toggle device toolbar within Chrome tools. So if I click on this, it essentially puts me into an area where I can select different screen sizes based off of devices, as well as I can create kind of my own default devices that I want to set up. So what I've done is I've actually created a bunch of different device sizes based off of our various viewport sizes. And it lets me easily kind of test different sizes based off of those breakpoints that we have. I still definitely kind of resize the window to see how things kind of reflow initially, but this kind of helps me see where it might make sense to make changes in reflows based off of the breakpoints that we have available. So it's kind of a tool that's been pretty helpful for me. Another thing that you can actually do from this area as well, from this device toolbar, is you can actually do the throttling for the network. So some of you may also be familiar with using within the network pane, within the inspector, doing throttling. So I can test out various different load speeds. This one, I don't think you can really edit the ones that are provided here within this section. It only has like a mid, low, and then offline, but it's still helpful to kind of get a quick visualization of how things load at different speeds, whether it be on a mid-tier network or something a bit slower where it takes longer to load. It just can be kind of helpful to see kind of those different states, as well as like if you have an offline situation, kind of understanding like how that affects things as well. Let's see here. And then the next thing I wanted to discuss was mobile testing on an actual device. So I found different instances where I've actually wanted to view the GDK on my actual mobile device. And when I initially went to try and set this up, I was having issues where I couldn't get it to work. And after troubleshooting with one of the developers, I found that I needed to actually update my host name to be 0.0.0 instead of the 127.0.0.1. I'm not exactly sure why this change needs to be made. And I actually asked this in the GDK channel and waiting for a response on that. But this essentially solved it for me, was updating my host name to be that. And so I provided some instructions on how you can easily do that. You have to do a GD reconfigure afterwards. But then after you've completed that, if you find your local IP address, which I provided like a quick snippet here that you can use in your terminal to figure that out, or you can go to network preferences and you can also obtain your IP address from there. After that, you can essentially view your GDK from your device by simply putting in your IP address followed by the port, which is 3000. I will note you need to make sure you're on the same network as your computer running the GDK, otherwise this won't work. So just ensure that you have both devices on the same network. But then, yeah, you should be able to test things out on an actual device. It's helpful to make sure you're kind of seeing how things interact with like, the keyboard on your device or different interactions for mobile. So I found that helpful in different instances as well. Some other things that have been helpful for me is, I'm fairly familiar with the inspector in Chrome DevTools, just because I've had some past development experience. But even with that, like I still at times find it somewhat kind of cumbersome to find specific things that I'm looking for. And I found a few various extensions that have helped make that a bit easier. And so some of these are for font identifiers and others for color identifiers. And so I'll quickly showcase a couple of those. So let me get out of here. So the first one here is called Want Font, and all you do is you toggle this on, and you can hover over any font, and it'll essentially tell you what font it's using. But then if you actually click on it, it gives you the font. I'm surprised it's saying System UI right here. It should actually say GitLab Sans. Maybe it just needs a reload. Yeah, that was weird. But yeah, so you can hover over to see actual font names, but then if you click on it, you'll get like the full details of like the weight, the line height, the font size, etc. So that can be quite helpful just to quickly identify fonts. When it comes to colors, there's a couple different extensions. One is the color pick eyedropper. This one's helpful just because it provides like a little magnifier to easily kind of locate and see various colors. Whereas another one that I've used as well is called the Colorzilla, and it's similar, but I've had it where you have a harder time kind of getting right over the different areas to make sure you're getting an accurate kind of rating for the font. So it's easier for large areas, but I actually like the first one that I pointed out a little bit better for finding colors. The next thing I wanted to go over was permissions. So a lot of times we'll have specific functionality that'll be role or permission specific. And at those times I found it, I've kind of had to go back into my users and make sure I have a user set up with certain like roles just to make sure that I'm testing different various things. And so what I've actually done recently is went into the user section of my GDK and just went ahead and just created kind of like a test suite of users just to make it so I don't have to keep kind of looking for this information later on or making sure I have something set up. So I've essentially just created like different users, or I've really just reused the users that were already in here and just renamed them based off of the different roles we have available. And then I went into some of these different major projects or groups that I generally testing with, and I added them to those based off of those roles. So if I ever am in a situation, say I'm like wanting to test like an issue page, and say I'm right now I'm logged in as essentially the administrator, but say I want to see what this looks like to a guest role, I can easily go into my guest user, I can hit impersonate. But if I go back to this page and refresh, I'm now viewing this as that guest role and seeing how things change based off of only having guest access. So that can be helpful just to, one, make sure you're kind of testing various roles and permissions, as well as like if you have this already set up, you're not having to kind of check that and kind of set things up in the moment, and it makes it a lot easier for me, at least when I need to do stuff like that. Let's see here. This does take a bit of time to set up. It didn't take me too long, but I also think that resetting your GDK data would probably also lose this. That's one kind of caveat with that as well. Some other things that I wanted to go over quickly were around accessibility. So I've found a few different extensions that have been helpful just for checking color contrast, as well as kind of debugging and viewing focus states. So I'll show a couple of those. So first of all, one that I've used is this color contrast checker. And it essentially just brings up a little panel where you can select, various different areas. I guess that's the background. With a swatch. And then it'll give you kind of your accessibility values here on the left. And if I wanted to, I could take a screenshot of this showing that it's meeting, or if it was, failing, I could take a screenshot of this and point to the area where it was failing. So I found that pretty useful instead of having to, a lot of times I, in the past, just went to the site that has like the contrast checker and would plug in my values, but this makes it so I don't have to really leave the page and I can do it all from here. There's another one called the WCAG contrast checker. This one's nice because it essentially reviews like the entire page and outlines any errors that have arisen. So if I see here, if I click on this one, the reload. I'm not, oh, there it is. So yeah, the highlight's not perfect, but what it does is it kind of, when you click on different areas, it'll highlight it in the UI. So this area isn't meeting contrast guidelines. There's some other areas here that I can identify. If you want to actually look for a specific instance, it has a similar color picker that I just showed you to the other plugin where you can do the same thing. But yeah, the nice one about this is, like I said, it kind of reviews the entire page for you, and you can kind of easily see what's failing. And then some of the other ones for accessibility, there's this one called Nerd Focus, and this one is helpful for just debugging various focus states of like not understanding where the focus is, or seeing clearly seeing when focus is changing. So you actually have to go in here to like Dev Tools and go to Nerd Focus, show indicator. And then as I tab through, it gives me a clear indicator where the focus is. And I think an area where I can show you where this is a little bit more valuable, go to this page. Or actually, this wasn't the one. Let me actually do one other thing. Here's a good example. So we didn't have great focus states for these elements, as you can see, but it kind of helps to highlight what's actually being focused in different areas. So this can be great for like debugging focus states and when we don't have great focus styles applied for certain things. And then if I were to go back, turn that off real quick. Another one that I found helpful is being able to see the tab order on the page. So this is a nice plugin that will actually go through the entire page. It can be problematic if you have a really long page because it can take a while for it to do this, but essentially it'll kind of scan the entire page and then show you all the ordering for tabbing throughout your page. There are some different configurations you can do for this, such as you can change the color, you can make it so it doesn't draw paths, so on and so forth. So some configurations for that. But it can, like I said, it can be kind of helpful just to understand the tab ordering and making sure it matches kind of our goals for how that would work. All right. And then some of the last things that I wanted to cover was just capturing various things for essentially providing for the development team. I've used a couple of different things for still images. One of them that I use the most is Awesome Screenshot. The reason I like this one is, after, so like say I've checked the contrast on something. Let's say I was noticing that this was a bit off. I actually noticed this earlier that it was. So it's actually failing. So what I could do here is, now that I have that shown, I could take a quick screenshot with this plugin, and then I can easily highlight, this. provide some text. And then I can easily just save this and provide it to development team. So I like that one because you can do some quick annotations on it and then save it without having to kind of do things in Figma or something after you've taken a screenshot. So I found that pretty useful. You can actually also take screen captures or animated GIFs with this as well. And it actually works pretty well. I hadn't used it too much ahead of doing this talk, but I decided to try it out recently. It does a good job. The thing that I don't like about it is you don't have very much control over the size and the frames per second, which can have a big impact on the file size for a GIF. So if I did like a bit of a longer GIF, it's going to be quite large and probably not something I would want to upload it into GitLab. Versus using a different tool that I've linked here, Cap. This one gives you a lot more control over both like the resolution as well as the frames per second, to where I can kind of modify things to get it to a point where it's not a huge file size, and I can easily upload that into GitLab. So those are a couple important ones that I use for capturing stuff for development team. And then I just included a slide here at the end, just for anyone who wants to share their tips or tools that they use as they're doing MR reviews. I'd love to have you include some stuff here as well. But yeah, these are just some of the things that I found make it a bit more efficient for me to do reviews and have been helpful. So I thought I would share some of my my tools. But thanks.
Thanks, Nick. There are a couple read-onlys. Does anybody want to voice their read-only? Or Austin, would you like to voice yours?
Yeah, sure. So one that you didn't cover, Nick, but I don't use it a ton, but occasionally I've needed it. It's maybe a little more advanced, but if you can learn some basics around APIs using the network tab, I think I've only done this under Firefox. I'm not sure how it works under Chrome, but there's like a way that you can essentially block a request, which is helpful to kick off error states or page spinners like in a specific section, or if you want to isolate it to an area. So I linked to a GIF that Rob Hunt had shared in the old MR with me that kind of like illustrates like how you can block requests and force sections to make an error appear or the spinner appear, which is helpful when you're trying to get all of those different nuances to a new feature or a new page or something. So that could be one we could add to the slide deck.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I was thinking maybe there's somewhere in the handbook where you could link to the presentation. We can look and see where it would be appropriate, but I'm sure there's somewhere that talks about doing MR reviews where that would fit in really nicely as a resource.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to think of a good spot for that, but yeah, we can look into figuring out where I could include some information around this.